I welcome you officially to Digital Shift.
Yes.
Today we're going to talk about uncertainty. May we ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Daniel Diemers. I'm a big fan of Digital Shift and have been attending events prior to that, and even once had the opportunity to speak on trust in the context of blockchain. I am currently a freelance consultant in the area of digital and exponential technologies with a particular interest in fintech, blockchain, crypto, and also artificial intelligence. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here today. From an academic background, I have studied economics and sociology, and I have a PhD in knowledge management and trust in virtual communities.
So you're working a lot with blockchain startups. Is actually a very uncertain field where many ideas are experimented on. And so somehow you have to, for yourself, find a way to see, okay, which bets are worth it and which bets are not worth it. And you have to decide that in a large uncertainty.
I mean, I actually feel comfortable with that uncertainty. I think it what makes it exciting, you know. I'm very intrigued by anything that is more, like what we just discussed, exponential with a high level of uncertainty. And my personal strategy to cope with that is twofold. I think one is to really take a very, I would say, playful mindset to the table. So if you are very rigid in your way of thinking, if you are very certainty seeking, and you want just the facts on the table and no potential things to develop, then definitely that's not the right mindset to look at these things. I think you need to stay flexible. You need to, kind of digest if assumptions that you had in the past are suddenly not true anymore, or there are new developments. I mean, in blockchain, we have almost every year something completely new that happens. That makes new paradigms, new technology advances, etc. So this is my first strategy. My first strategy is to come with a really flexible and adaptable and also playful mindset to this, and basically look at every change or every assumption that proved wrong. I look as a positive and embrace this. The second thing is more from a epistemological or knowledge management perspective. I always try to conceptualize and strategize. So I create always for myself mental models or basically conceptual views of how that industry will develop, who will be key drivers, what may happen, what may not happen, you know. So I try to run around with a certain blueprint in my head of the future, basically, you know, thinking forward, not just 6 months, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and having a kind of a hypothesis and a rough blueprint or a plan, and that gives me, you know, some peace of mind that I can really not maybe predict, but I can, whatever happens, I can kind of put it in my frame of reference and see whether this is something as expected or this is something new. And if it's something new, I can challenge now the whole mental model, the whole blueprint, and can adapt it again, etc., etc. So, you know, from that point of view, I think it's really, it's the two strategies I'm deploying. So one is more of a mindset, and the second is more, you know, actually defining some strategic cornerstones and building mental models and blueprints for the future about the areas, you know, I feel I'm capable to do that. You know, of course I cannot do that across all and everything, but I try to build mental maps that at least minimum go 5 years ahead, if not beyond. So it's not about which company makes what move and which other company may react to that move, but more like what are the underlying sociological, technological, economical trends, and how that could shape, you know, a future to come, you know. And I no means want to say I can forecast things, right? But for example, that simple triangle model has helped me, basically also evaluate and see, what's been happening the last 20 years in a very good way,
You try to make a simpler version of reality, so to help you think about it, and at each time something happens, you see if that simplified model of reality actually is accurate.
Yes, exactly.
It reflects something, and if it's not accurate, you change it.
Yeah. And this simplification I basically do by always going on a higher meta level. So the example of cyborgization is very broad. You can pack a lot of things into cyborgization: artificial limbs, enhancements of the body, chips in the body, but also, I don't know, contact lenses, interactive contact lenses are also an extension of our body, or cryonics, taking pills that make you live longer, or going into a vegan diet because you want to live healthier and longer. These are, for me, all elements under cyborg. Now, you could strictly speaking say, no, it has nothing to do with this, and not, but I don't care, because I'm going on a meta level and just try to cluster things and make them meaningful for me. And I think this probably will also work well in the future, because when I went to Singularity University, I learned there are about 100 different exponential technologies today, 100, right? And when you talk about artificial intelligence and blockchain, these are only 2 out of 100. So how can you possibly, as a human, cope with 100 different exponential technologies if not, it's kind of, if you're not kind of reducing this to some level of complexity where you feel at ease, right? And of course, I always build my models in a way that I feel at ease with it.
That leads well into my next question. In your function as a consultant in exponential technology, I assume you also help the companies that you're working with choosing and picking one of those exponential technologies. How do you choose them? Because as Anang said, there are many eggs in one basket. How do you know which one to take?
I mean, this is exactly the type of projects I like to do. I'm not claiming that I know all the good eggs and the bad eggs, but obviously many corporates, large and small today, have the same problem, right? So at least what I want to do, I want to guide and help them a bit, and just tell them, you have a higher. I want to be a bit like a digital Sherpa, a Sherpa, so the client wants to go to the Mount Everest and climb to a very steep mountain, but maybe has never done it before, is maybe physically not top fit for that, and is maybe scared, just simply scared of doing it. And I can be a Sherpa, and I maybe say I'm not a famous explorer, but I have maybe climbed such mountains before. I have the right mindset, I have the fitness to do it, and I can just help you, and help you go up and come down safe. And I think this is the kind of work attitude that I have, or the certain consulting attitude. So if a client says, I'm going to hire you if you can predict me the future exactly to the last dot in the next 5 to 10 years, I will say, sorry, we're probably not gonna have business together. I cannot do that, but I can at least help them in doing what probably every company these days should be doing, is basically reviewing very fundamentally, and maybe even in the COVID situation now, how who are our employees, who are our clients, how are we delivering value to the market, how are we earning money.
Can we go a bit more granular in one point? So if you're working with somebody and there's maybe like 10 technologies which might be promising, but the company has like limited resources and maybe they can try out 2 or 3 bets.
Yeah.
And so how would you help them to decide on which 3 or 4 bets to take?
Yeah, so this is a simple one, right? I mean, not saying simple in terms of simple to deliver, but I'm saying it's simple to have the methodology mapped out for this. I've done such projects before. I call this actually building a technology roadmap and deriving a strategy out of the technology roadmap. So this is how you do it. You look at the business of the client. You look at all, but really all the potentially relevant technologies that are out there that could impact that business. Okay, and you put all those technologies on a time frame. Basically, imagine a big timeline, and you add all these technologies there. Particularly, of course, in terms of maturity of the technology. So, some technologies like quantum computing today are very, very early stage, right? So anyone who tells me, oh, we will have a full quantum computer ready by next year and disrupt, I don't know, financial markets in the world, I think that's bogus, at least if you talk to quantum computing experts. So, you put all the relevant technologies on the timeline. And once you do that, then you cluster them in terms of relevance. So which technologies are probably more relevant and which are less relevant. And that is in step one. And in step two, you actually, together with the client, you go through the various clusters and you say, okay, imagine all these technologies we're looking at here would be in place today, would be working. How would that impact your business or your, let's say, three businesses, let's say if they have three different businesses. And then you work out together with the client what would be a potential impact here. And then this leads to in the end, to a strategic analysis where you see this is the roadmap. These are the areas that are very relevant for our core business, and these are the areas that are maybe less relevant for the core business. And then based on that analysis, the client can then make a more or less informed decision on either, do we need to act now, today, in doing something different, adopting our value proposition, changing our operating model, or, and that could also be a positive outcome, are we good in the moment today? Are we fine? But there's a certain technology, certain developments that we need to monitor very, very closely, because once they become more developed, they could really impact us heavily. And this type of analysis is also useful, right? Because then you can maybe define someone in your company to take care of. I mean, let's stay with the quantum computing example. You just tell that person, please, on a weekly basis, make sure you have all the latest and greatest in quantum computing, and give us a heads up early on when you feel like we're coming to a maturity stage where this could become relevant for us. And voila, after one project, you have already built a little early warning system for certain technologies, right?
I would like to know, how do you think the world will change, and how do you think it should change now as a consequence that we're living quite uncertain times?
Ooh, this is a very very broad question, but I love it. I mean, yeah, I think fundamentally the big change that we need to do is probably get a bit of different attitude to both technology, so how does technology transform and what are the technologies? And then secondly, discuss much more the impact of the technologies. Let's say worried, and I think we're not doing a really good job is, I mean, in German there was a topic, or the keyword for that in the 90s in sociology was Technologiefolgeabschätzung, a very cumbersome word. So technology Folge impact assessment, something like that, right? And it meant basically studies and discussions and discourses around the impact of technology. And I think this is something we urgently need to do much more, and we're not doing it a lot, which is really get a broader dialogue going about, how will the future look like, what technologies will change. And I think we need to have that dialogue early on, because there's so many associated questions to it. I was actually trying to formulate that back in 2002 when after I wrote my book. I was wondering, because I'm generally a techno optimist. So I think technology in itself, you know, is not bad or good, but it's just a tool, and what we do with it is going to make the difference in the world, factually, right? So if technology is not good or is not bad, we need to even more so have a clear view what we're going to do with it, right? Who's going to do what with it, and are there certain restrictions? So I'm not a fan of saying, okay, once the technology is here, everyone can do everything with it, because that usually leads to bad outcomes, right? Or uneven outcomes. You know, some people benefiting most and most people not benefiting at all, or very delayed, or even having to pay for it, etc. So I think this social discourse of what do we actually do with these technologies once they are here, this should happen and should have happened already years ago. And to your theme, this has something to do with uncertainty reduction. You know, if we don't lead a public discourse about how does a world look like with, you know, let's say singularity, so AI that is smarter than us, how does a world look like when we have quantum computers? How does a world look like when, I don't know, all the money is only digital and on blockchains? Topics like that, you know, we need to discuss early on. On AI, there are now a couple, because this is probably the technology we humans are most scared of, also maybe thanks to a lot of Hollywood movies where we see how AI going bad can really hurt us. then we have created now, you know, ethics councils and councils on AI or responsible AI and all that stuff. And I think this is useful, but again, it shouldn't be led by 5 scientists meeting another 5 scientists. But I think we need a really broad public discourse in the society, you know, where everyone, literally everyone, is potentially able to get involved and have a discussion. You know, so there's plenty of to do here, or plenty of way that we need to cover, and I don't think we're doing enough of that. So having early on discussions in the broader sense, in a broader context. And this is maybe something where digital shift, I understand you want to also do that, right? You want to have these type of dialogues and discussions and get everyone involved, and not just a small elitish group that, I don't know, deal with these topics anyway. And I think that's something that is really missing. And yeah, it may lead to an outcome where in the end, only again, a few are in control of what's happening with these technologies. And I don't think that's necessarily the best outcome. You know? And just as a last comment, blockchain technology is an interesting one here, because obviously of most of the exponential technologies, most of them have been, let's say, created or started by large governments or large companies. So if you ask today who are the best and leading AI players in the market, who are ahead on AI, you will hear names like Google. Sorry? Google, Baidu, Google, maybe Amazon, maybe Apple, I don't know. But it's big names. And then maybe you hear the Chinese government and the US government has a big AI program. Okay, fine, right? But this is then not really a technology in the hands of the people, but in the hands of a few corporates. The same if you ask for quantum computing, who is leading edge in supercomputers and quantum computing. It's not just a random people around the world, but it's mostly governments and maybe large tech companies.
A thing we are looking at, which I find quite interesting, many supply chains now had the problems because they were so integrated, and now any small disruption broke them down. So a thing we see is that many like supply chains have always made somewhere an element that needs a person to go physically to some place. And if that element is part of your chain, then that doesn't work. And so we are maybe looking at, is it interesting to look at, one thing we're looking at was like remote selling, doing things like completely remotely. Do you think it might be interesting to dig deeper in that? Just, we think if that part is still part of your chain is actually not fully digitized and is brittle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's very worth. I think it again. I think the crisis is not a positive thing, but it has helped surface some topics that we probably need to think about and discuss, right? And what we see right now is the result of probably 20, 30 years of management literature, right, so to say. So I mean, when I studied economics in St. Gallen, I had my fair amount of business administration too. And if you read all these different principles in business, starting with the Japanese Kaizen, and all these different methods, I think that Toyota was inventing, and so on and so forth. I mean, the whole business literature or narrative has been one about optimizing shareholder value. How do you optimize shareholder value? You increase profitability of a company. How do you increase the profitability? You either increase revenues or decrease cost, but ideally you do both. And when you want to decrease costs, you're immediately in a discussion about, how does the supply chain look like for our products? How do we, manufacture products and deliver them to clients? And this has been optimized, maybe over-optimized, right, over the past decades, to the point where it's all about efficiency. And what we've seen now in the COVID crisis is this efficiency has led to the point where there are no buffers in between. There are no plan Bs and plan Cs. There are no, I mean, in the old days, companies used to have large warehouses full of stuff, raw materials or products. And thanks to the efficiency mantra and also digital technology has helped with that, obviously, all these warehouses have disappeared because, if you produce a car today, the piece that you're going to weld or give to the robot to work on usually arrives the same day from some supplier through a logistics chain. If it doesn't arrive, the whole plant stands still, but it's all made in a way that it should arrive. And now we have seen how, in a way, dangerous this model is, because if some pieces fall apart, the company cannot generate any value anymore. I think that the technical term for that is resilience, business resilience. So being able to cope with uncertainty, unexpected events, and efficiency and resilience are, in that sense, at two different polars, or they're polarizing and stand against each other. The more efficient you become, the less resilient. The more resilient you become, the less efficient you probably are. So that's an interesting one, right? And maybe that mantra of efficiency and bring down the cost is now going to change slightly after this crisis. Let's hope it's soon over, because people will just say, well, let's maybe, this product will be a bit more costly and a bit less profitable, but at the same time, we are much more resilient. Because we don't, rely on a global supply chain. Now, obviously, with the internet or digital, what you mentioned, sales, marketing, delivery, it can be used both ways. So again, it's technology. It's not good or bad. I mean, you can use digital technology to make a supply chain super resilient, because for every, let's say, partner, you have 5 backup partners that can jump in at any second, and you just press a button and it's rolling. Or you can use them to make it super efficient. So again, it's we humans who decide if we want the supply chain to be highly resilient or highly efficient. It's our decision. Technically nothing to do with the internet. Of course, without any digital and internet, we could not have that choice, or the choices would look different. But I think fundamentally we need to make that call, and it's going to be interesting to see if some companies are going to change their strategies after what's happening right now in the world.
What would you advise us in these times?
For the entrepreneurs or just humans out there, I think it's scary times, but I would say don't be too scared, right? We need to make the best out of this, and maybe this is just the beginning of much more uncertainty coming in the future. As this planet gets more and more digital, but also more and more populated, and we're changing the face of the planet on a day-to-day basis, global warming. So I think uncertainty likely is going to rather increase than decrease. So, you know, I think you need to get away from the fear and scared mode to something that is more probably constructive and helpful, you know, for the broader development. But then to you particular as Digital Shift, you know, I think your mission of having you know, informed discussions and dialogues, and maybe sometimes also controversial juxtapositions, I think you should absolutely carry on that mission. So there's so many questions we need to answer. Who gets access to AI at what point? At what point do you let AIs talk to your baby or your kids? At what point would you allow your AI to become the teacher of your kids? You know, can AI teachers do a better job than human teachers, or how can we use AI in education? There's so many questions around this that are very human in nature and impact also the way we go forward as a society, right? And I think these are all, in my view, quite relevant topics that in a structured way, no one is really addressing it, you know.